What's up, champs? Welcome to another installment of the Short Shifts of Fantasy Hockey podcast, brought to you today by Keeping Karlsson. I am your host, Ben Burnett. Joining me, as always, my pal and yours, the talented Mr. E, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how you doing on this wonderful Thursday evening?
Doing very well. Brought to you today and every day by Keeping Karlsson, our wonderful sponsors.
I'm doing this new thing, Louis, where I just make it up as I'm going, rather than like developing any sort of routine. I think it's my general contrarianism. After I think Elon like a few weeks ago was like, I don't want to have a whole thing like Ben does where he like does all of he goes through it all. And I, in that moment was like, I don't do that. And, in my head now, I'm somebody who, my brain is just like, now I can't do that ever again.
Well, I've been reading the outro for so long. I think I'm really going to freak people out when I break tendency one of these days and just read a wild outro at some point. But for now, I'm going to keep lulling them into a false sense of security. But listen, we have a ton of news that we got into here today.
Yeah, you're right.
You want to get us started?
I do. And we're going to start in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Good news on the Chris Letang front. Just 10 days after suffering a stroke, Letang was back on the ice, skating in a regular jersey as a full participant in practice today. He has not yet been cleared for game action, but the team's doctor vocalized what the rest of us are all thinking, which is he always surprises us with how well he heals. We don't think this is accelerated in any way, which sounds pretty promising. However, Letang and the team doctor both said that they weren't planning to rush anything. It's not clear when he'll actually get back into the lineup, but when I checked Yahoo earlier today, Letang was rostered in just 79% of Yahoo leagues. That number should probably tick back up into the 90% range, given, as I was doing prep for this show, I learned that Freddie Anderson, for example, is 92% rostered, which means to me, if you are in a league where Freddie Anderson is in somebody's IR, Chris Letang should definitely be in your IR. So, yeah, very exciting to hear about somebody who could be a game changer for your squad when he returns to full health.
Yeah, absolutely. And good to see him getting back out there and doing what he loves. Outstanding. We're going to head to another defenseman, this time in Vegas. We received word on Wednesday that Alex Pietrangelo's absence from the Golden Knights, which is now up to 4 games, was related to an illness in the family and that he will be out indefinitely. We joked a little bit about showing excessive concern over players out with injury last show, but we are sincerely hoping for everything to turn out positively for the Pietrangelos. In the fantasy world, the main beneficiary of AP's absence is Theodore, who scored 5 points in the 4 games Pietrangelo has been gone, pending later results. Posting greater than 64% power play time on ice in all of those games and over 80% in 3 of 4. So obviously they're really leaning on him hard to fill that power play quarterback position. Theodore is already widely rostered at 97% on Yahoo, so it's unlikely there's anything actionable there in terms of adding him to your roster. However, Pietrangelo owners, I was looking around to see what sort of power play options were kind of out there. Rasmus Sandin has been maybe an option to replace some of Pietrangelo's production. Sheldon Keefe said today that there's been no update on Morgan Riley. He's been training but hasn't put on skates yet. Sandin has been consistently filling that top power play. I wouldn't expect that to change. So that's an option, I think, for folks. He's in 27% of leagues. Sandin is on a roster, so he should be out there for quite a few people who maybe are now seeing that Pietrangelo absence is going to be a little longer maybe than they expected.
Yes, it's a huge bummer not having Alex Pietrangelo just suddenly, but obviously something that we're going to have to deal with for a little while. And I know I felt a little panicked just at the news on Wednesday. It's hard not to get into a mode of just like, oh my God, if he's gone indefinitely, that could be forever. And I'll just remind folks of like the Artemi Panarin absence last year, where it's just turned out to be a few weeks. He came back. He was Artemi Panarin. I wouldn't panic too much in terms of Alex Pietrangelo, not because I know what's going on, but just because it's not, usually the right play to panic right away.
Definitely.
We do have one outry that is very exciting in Florida. Captain Alex Barkov returns to the Thurs lineup Thursday, celebrating our favorite day of the week. He had missed 6 games with pneumonia, and unfortunately, as he returns, Anton Lundell and Spencer Knight are both out with a non-COVID illness. And I'll mention Knight again here in a second. But just to say that Barkov has struggled this year, he's pacing for just 78 points after finishing well above a point per game pace the last 2 years. I think he'll be okay. I think he'll get back at some point this season, despite the slow start. I think the question coming back from pneumonia is just whether he'll need a few games to get back up to speed. Get that lung capacity back up. As we talk about this, the Panthers have 3 goals, and Barkov does have a primary assist on an A2 Luosterainen goal tonight. So yeah, hopefully he continues to look pretty good. If he does, have a bit of a slow return, though, I do think that is the moment that you check in on frustrated Barkov owners, who were probably sick of him before the injury or before the sickness. And then he kept on being out all last week. It was very frustrating. And then for him to come back and start slow, I think might be a good buying opportunity. I did mention Spencer Knight a second ago, and I'll just say, unclear if he'll miss more than tonight's game, but Sergei Bobrovsky does get a chance to make things right with a start against Detroit tonight. And not to give the short shift mid-game curse, but he's looking pretty good so far. Shut it. Halfway through the second.
Yeah, Detroit has not been able to put together a whole lot, and clearly Florida is coming out very strong. Maybe a bit of a nice bonus for him to be able to come back the same game that Barkov returns. It seemed pretty likely that Bobrovsky was going to start this game one way or the other after Knight was pulled from the previous game. This may be an opportunity for him to seize back that starter's role. Obviously, that contract means that he's going to get a lot of shots at it. We should never really count him out of that race for the top goalie job, despite Spencer Knight's success so far this season. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We'll definitely have our eye on it over the coming weeks here. Nice opportunity, I think, for Bobrovsky maybe to take over some more of that time. We got to get to a segment that is just becoming kind of standard every couple weeks here, and that is the checking in on Tage Thompson going crazy on some team. Tage went nuclear against the Blue Jackets. He scored 5 goals on 9 shots, along with an assist in just 13 minutes and 54 seconds of ice time. That is some serious efficiency. He has already reached 40 points on the young season and is right in the Jason Robertson goal scoring zone, after adding 5, count 'em 5, the other night. He and his colleagues are widely owned, but Buffalo obviously is a great source of offense right now. Just a sample of some of the bonkers streaks going on in Buffalo right now. Tage has 18 points over the last 8 games. Skinner with 13 points in that stretch. Dylan Cousins with 15 points there. Alex Tuck with 12 points and Rasmus Dahlin with 12 points. All of those over the course of those 8 games. Just, unbelievable production. Only Dylan Cousins from that group is available in more than 40% of leagues. But I might get in there and grab him if you haven't yet. He's not on that top line, but he has been excellent on Power Play 1 and lining up with rookies JJ Peterka and Jack Quinn, who also might be have some value for folks in deeper leagues. So just some Buffalo players to keep an eye on. Obviously, we can't expect that level of production every game, but it does seem like every week or two we just have one of these offensive explosions. This one, of course, came at the expense of the Columbus Blue Jackets goalies. And we are pouring one out for you here on the show. If you were one of the people who, on a not so busy night, had the tandem and decided, hey, I'll toss them both up just in case one gets pulled. Yikes. Tough look, obviously, for those folks. And we feel your pain.
Yeah, they're definitely licking their wounds right now.
That's absolutely right. They are feeling corpusaro for themselves.
Exactly. All right. One more injury update to get to tonight. And that is in Carolina, where Frederik Andersen returned to the ice for practice with the Canes on Thursday. Still no timetable for his return. He told reporters today he's having trouble with his knee that requires a lot of rest. And when I hear that, it just feels like the type of injury where a return to game action isn't preluded by a return to practice, because I think what we'll see is, or what we are looking for now, is the body's response to this workout. Because either he will, I feel like we see a lot with knee injuries, the type of thing of people are day to day until they try to practice after 2-3 days, and that makes it worse. So I'm hopeful for Freddie, but I do know that we've seen this a lot from him the past few years. He remains 92% rostered on Yahoo, as I mentioned. So likely there's nothing, you're not going to rush out and grab him just because he returned to practice today, because he's not going to be on your waiver wire. But I did want to take this opportunity to talk about Peter Kochetkov, who is coming off a rare mediocre evening for him on Tuesday. He's otherwise been quite solid, and the Canes have pointed in 9 of his 10 starts so far into the season. He's got a 60% quality start rate, and really hasn't had a bad blow-up game. His worst start was giving up 4 goals on 27 shots back in late November. So Kochetkov to me is someone to keep watching. I just see him on the transaction trends on Yahoo all the time. He just seems to keep on rising in his ownership rate. He leapfrogged Antti Ranta for the starter's job once Franderson went out. And if signs continue to point to Freddie coming back, I think that Kochetkov is still a hold. For me, as long as his play continues to be, the 919 that we've seen so far, until we see the Canes actually send him back down, I think he's somebody that you want to be holding on to. One other note for Carolina, Sebastian Aho, a game time decision tomorrow, missed Canes practice on Thursday, and Rod Brindamore said that if he doesn't return to practice on Friday, he will not play. So keep your eye tuned to twitter.com/GameDayNewsNHL. We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we have a couple of players in Montreal and Calgary who just need a talking to. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis in particular, welcome back. We are moving on into the second half of our show, and we have to start by talking about the St. Louis Blues. We have to, Lewis. It's a rule.
Yes. So we spent some time on the show that came out Wednesday morning discussing this disastrous streak that Jordan Binnington's been on. So Thomas Greiss gets the start here on Thursday as we record. He's got a 3-game winning streak in games that he has started. Although it is worth noting, and this came up on the Discord too, although I did write it in my notes independently, so it was a great mind situation. Greiss doesn't have a quality start in this winning streak. He only has 2 total out of 8 starts. So like I said last show, I don't necessarily love him as a potential add, but, Ben mentioned he could be quality in terms of volume. He doesn't have a ton of quality starts, but he doesn't have a really bad start either. That would be a start where he has under 850 save percentage. Doesn't have one this season. So it seems like he's going to give you a more sort of moderate performance as opposed to the extreme highs and lows of Jordan Binnington's season thus far. We talked previously about how Coach Berube was not super pleased with Binnington and his antics. And it makes sense that Greiss would get this start, The coach just sort of brought up the fact that he's been more successful. The team's been able to win games when he's in there. So that's where we are at. I like him okay as a short-term volume guy. I don't think he's going to, stop as many pucks as you would like if you're going for goals against average or save percentage. Maybe look elsewhere. But yeah, he's going to have some options. And as long as we're talking some short-term value, I have to give credit to this week's Cupful Tier 1 Sweden opponent Ryan for his ludicrous stream of 0% owned Josh Levo, who was elevated to the Ryan O'Reilly Shen line in the Blues game against the Islanders, scored his first goal of the season to go with an assist on 5 shots. Just a ton of outstanding production from a 0% owned guy. Cool to see it happen. Wish it wasn't against me, but hey, that's how it goes. He got second power play time as well. And this was a guy who was, as Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme would say, D-U-E, with no goals on 36 shots before that game. Not a guy that I'd be running out to grab if it cost me a reliable player, but certainly an interesting option for those deep leagues where the waiver wire is picked clean. at least as long as he is getting this deployment on that top-ish line. I suppose you would probably say the Rob Tom line is number one, but getting some good minutes there for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those teams where I feel like the second line by whatever the line rush is the scoring line. So not necessarily the typical way to refer to a fantasy relevant line. Lewis, we are moving right along. I'm going to take us to Montreal next, where I want to mention Kirby Dach, who has gone ice cold the last 8 games, just 3 points, all assists, which has been extremely frustrating, especially after he went pointless on Monday against Vancouver while his teammates racked up 6 goals. I was fuming. I'll be honest with you, Lewis. And thanks to this cold stretch, Dach now has 19 points in 26 games, which puts him at a 60-point pace. And when I saw that number, I kind of took a breath and was like, all right, honestly, a pretty nice breakout for someone who is going undrafted in most leagues. Hopes were just so high 3 weeks ago before he went cold that I just am bummed out. I think that I missed my opportunity to sell high. I just, if you're in tier 2 San Jose, of the Cupful, hit me up if you want to take a roll on Kirby Dach, who, I mean, a few good signs for him. His ice time has not faltered at all through this cold streak. He's maintaining line 1 power play 1 deployment. He's still playing 18 to 21 minutes nearly every night with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. There are much worse spots to be. Both of those players are still scoring. Suzuki's been very hot. Caulfield's just not been getting in on these goals lately. His IPP is a little low. So, I think it still evens out based on the fact that the line's on ice shooting percentage is just ridiculous still. That's still taking some time to regress, but generally we're seeing a regression to a more sustainable pace. So I think 60 points for Dach is honestly pretty good, even if he is putting up or getting 20 minutes a night, because he's still only shooting 1.5 times per game. It just might be a role thing. We do know of players who put up 60 points even with great deployment. They just happen to be on teams or just in a situation where they're not shooting enough to really sustain higher. So I think, it's a bummer. I feel the pain here because he's stuck on my roster in a deep league because he's not performing well enough to keep. But because of his deployment, he feels too good to drop. It's, the worst game of limbo that I can imagine.
It is. It's that danger zone in between being, having the deployment but not producing with it that you get stuck in sometimes. And it can be painful if you miss out on an exciting player that you want to grab because you're unwilling to drop this guy. But sometimes it pays off and they'll find their groove again and take advantage of those minutes that they have available. I've got a hot streak and a cold streak to bring us home here. The hot streak is for Rasmus Andersson. He has had 6 points over the last 5 games. I think we can definitively say we are very, very clear, if we weren't already, about who the power play QB is in Calgary. He's definitely been a beneficiary of Nazem Kadri's return to success. Kadri had been cold for something like 6 or 7 games in a row with no points, but he has 5 points in his last 3 games. So he's definitely getting back to hitting, sort of what we expect to see from him. So Andersson with 6 points over those 5. He's got 3 on the power play, and Periffs have been decent as well. 11 shots and 12 blocks over that time. You probably did not draft Rasmus Andersson to be a hitter, so no big surprise to see those hit numbers are quite low. Again, like some of my other folks I've mentioned here, maybe not a lot to do with that information as Andersson is widely owned, but something to keep in mind, as we head into drafts next year. I think his draft position fell quite a bit because we weren't 100% sure that he was going to be the guy. But I think the way this season has started and what he's shown us, I think we can be pretty confident he will be the guy heading forward until something significant changes. The last guy I want to talk about is on a bit of a cold streak. And that is Nick Schmaltz in Arizona. He was preparing to return a couple weeks ago. Ben said he thought Schmaltz would be a great under-the-radar ad, and he was absolutely right. So credit where it's due. Schmaltz busted out in his return with 3 goals and an assist in his first 4 games back, averaging nearly 4 shots a game. But in the 4 games since, he's cooled way off, recording no points and just 1.25 shots per game. He's still seeing line 1 power play 1 deployment. And I wonder if some of these troubles maybe are the result of the Coyotes kind of being worn down by this extended away game slate that they have endured. It is finally wrapped up, and they will host Boston at home on Friday. A potentially more concerning explanation that sometimes accompanies a player seeing their shots suddenly fall off a cliff is injury. I don't want to speculate. I have no indication that this is the case, but just something that I'm sort of keeping my ear to the ground about. I definitely would not be quick to move on from Schmaltz. He's really shown the ability to drive offense. Even on a poor team, he's been getting prime deployment. I would definitely say he is a hold at least through Tuesday's game versus the Sharks. If he remains unproductive against Boston, and then he's got some weaker teams in Philadelphia and San Jose, then he might be worth revisiting next week on short shifts as a potential snoozer. But I would certainly not be making any move yet. 4 games off. I think just because of the sort of limited number of games that he's played on the season, it's an outsized level of concern. How often do you hear it from Ben and Elon, or Brian and Elon, I should say? A player goes cold for a few games when they haven't played many, and you say, well, if it was the middle of the season, you probably wouldn't mention it. But because it's, the small sample size of games so far, it sort of stands out. So that's sort of where I'm looking with Schmaltz right now.
I caught a glimpse of myself on the Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Keeping Karlsson, shameless plug moment. I realized it was the moment that I realized that both cold streak players are on my cupful team. And it's just depressing to hear, Lewis. I'm sad, but hey, it's a long season, and I'm ready for the bounce back already.
If it makes you feel any better, I have a feeling the Sunday show is going to be talking about some hot streaks for players like Pierre-Luc Dubois, for instance, who are just crushing me this week. So if you have the cold players on your team, I'm up against the hot players. That's just kind of the way it goes here.
Someday we'll meet in the middle. Lewis, that is all the time that we have for tonight's shift. Thank you for hanging out with me. I guess it's all the time we have for this week's shift, and that makes me sad, but we'll be back next week bringing you the premium midweek fantasy hockey content, that cheeky midweeky fantasy hockey content. Lewis, lovely to hang out with you. I'll see you on Tuesday.
Yes, thanks so much, everybody who came and joined us on the feed that Ben was just plugging, and for listening to us just on your podcast app. If you're on Twitter, please be sure to give us a follow at ShortShiftsKK. We're answering lots of questions there. Brian and Elon are at Keeping Karlsson. Dave Betton of the Stream Scheme at NHL Stream Scheme. Also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News NHL, all organized so nicely at GameDayLineTweets.com. Please visit that site and the other sites we use to research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.